Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive into snackable knowledge. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty cool.
Yeah.
The Pareto Principle.
Uh-huh.
You might know it as the 80-20 rule.
Right.
Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So this is the idea that roughly 80% of outcomes come from just 20% of efforts.
It's wild how often it actually
Yeah.
pops up.
So does this really hold up in the real world?
I think that's what's so fascinating about it is that it's not just like a business buzzword. It's actually rooted in math.
Okay.
Like if you look at the Pareto Principle, it's often expressed as like this neat 80-20 ratio, but it's actually based on something called a power law distribution.
Okay.
And that's a mathematical concept where a small number of things have a disproportionately large effect.
Interesting.
And this pattern pops up everywhere.
Okay, so I'm intrigued, but can you give me an example?
Well, let's go back to the roots of it.
Okay.
The principle is named after Vilfredo Pareto. He was an Italian economist back in the 19th century.
Interesting.
And he noticed that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by just 20% of the population.
Wow.
But the story that I think really brings it home is about Pareto's garden.
Okay.
You know the story about Pareto's garden?
I don't, but I'm excited to hear it.
Okay, so he was also a gardener, and he observed that 20% of his pea plants were producing 80% of the peas.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's kind of where the light bulb moment went off for him.
I see.
And that's what he started looking for in other areas as well.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not always exactly 80-20.
Right.
It's more the idea that there is a small percentage that leads to a large percentage of outcomes.
Yeah. And, you know, the 80-20 is kind of like a catchy thing, but it could be 75-25 or even 90-10.
Okay.
It's just about understanding this imbalance of cause and effect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're running a business. How could the Pareto Principle help a business?
Oh, it's a favorite tool in the business world?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, imagine discovering that 80% of your profits are generated by just 20% of your customers.
Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Like, what would you do with that information?
I mean, as a business owner, I would think, okay, so instead of trying to spread our resources thin, trying to please everybody, we could double down on that 20%.
Exactly. That's one way to use it.
Okay.
The flip side is you might use it to pinpoint problems.
Okay.
Like maybe 80% of product returns are due to 20% of the products having issues.
Interesting.
So then you could address those specific product flaws and significantly reduce returns and increase customer satisfaction.
Okay, that makes sense in a business context. But how about for us, just like in daily life?
Oh, it's such a good tool for productivity.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. Instead of being overwhelmed by everything on your to-do list, focus on the 20% of tasks that'll yield 80% of the results.
Okay, so it's about like really ruthlessly prioritizing.
Yeah. So instead of just diving into your to-do list, take a minute and think, okay, which of these tasks has the biggest impact on my goals? Which ones, if I complete them, will unlock other tasks? Which ones have the widest reaching consequences?
Interesting.
Those are your high impact tasks.
Okay.
The vital few.
I like that.
Yeah.
So if you can identify those and tackle those first, even if you have to push some other things to later, you're going to see more progress overall.
Totally. And it's not even just about getting things done faster. It's about where you're going to put your energy. That's a limited resource.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
So you want to spend it wisely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about when you're facing like a complex problem? Can the Pareto Principle help with that?
It can be a guide to effective problem solving.
Okay.
Because instead of getting overwhelmed by the entire mess, the Pareto Principle helps you target the root causes that are driving most of the trouble.
So you're not just trying a bunch of random solutions. You're really trying to figure out...
what's the source?
What's causing this?
Exactly.
Okay.
Like, let's say you're constantly missing deadlines.
Okay.
Ask yourself why.
Okay, so why am I constantly missing deadlines?
Maybe you're taking on too many projects.
Okay. And why am I taking on too many projects?
Maybe you're not good at saying no.
Yeah, why am I not good at saying no?
Right, you get the idea.
Yeah.
It's the 5 whys technique.
Okay.
You just keep asking why until you get to the bottom of it.
Interesting. So you're really trying to figure out the root cause of the problem.
Yes.
So how do we use the Pareto Principle to deal with that?
Well, so once you've identified these potential causes, you can group them. And you can rank them by impact. And the goal is to pinpoint that 20% of causes that are likely responsible for 80% of the negative consequences. So it's like creating a map of like what are the biggest troublemakers and then focus your efforts on those.
Okay, so you're not wasting time on things that won't make as much of a difference.
Exactly. Okay, that's the power of it.
I like it.
Yeah, it helps you find the leverage points.
Okay.
Where you can put in a little effort and get a big result.
Okay, can you give me an example of this in the real world?
Sure.
Like a problem-solving example.
Okay, let's say you're running an e-commerce business and you notice a spike in complaints about damaged products.
Okay.
You start digging and you discover that most complaints are linked to one type of packaging that's not protecting things well.
Interesting.
So instead of overhauling your entire packaging system, you focus on that one problem packaging.
Yeah, and it could potentially have a huge effect.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Six Sigma?
It rings a bell. It has something to do with quality control.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what it is.
So it's a quality management methodology.
Okay.
And it aims to minimize defects and improve processes.
Okay.
And guess what?
Right.
The Pareto Principle is one of its key tools.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. How does that work?
Well, they use something called a Pareto chart.
Okay.
It's a visual tool that helps you see which factors are contributing most to a problem.
Okay.
You can zero in on those.
Interesting. So you're taking that mental map and making it visual.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
It helps you prioritize and focus.
Yeah, this is all starting to click. So we've seen that businesses can use this to identify their most valuable customers and products.
Right.
Help them pinpoint the root cause of problems.
Yeah.
Even improve quality control, like through Six Sigma.
Yeah.
But is there a downside to being so focused on just the 20%?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So one of the pitfalls is over-focusing on the vital few and neglecting other important things.
Okay, so you don't want to completely ignore those other 80%.
Exactly.
Okay.
Prioritization is key, but so is balance.
Yeah. Are there any other traps that we should be aware of?
Another common one is thinking that you only need to put in 20% effort.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
The principle is about the distribution of causes and effects, not the effort.
Okay. So you still got to give it your all.
You got to give your 100% to that 20%.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just the tip of the iceberg then.
Oh, yeah. We've got a lot more to uncover.
I'm excited. I feel like I'm already seeing the world differently.
No, it's so cool.
Okay, well, before we go any further, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
And we'll be right back.
Welcome back.
So it's amazing how the Pareto Principle can make you rethink, like, how you approach things.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you're looking for those leverage points.
Right.
Where a small amount of effort can make a big result.
And it's not just theoretical.
Yeah.
It has practical application.
Yeah. So we talked about how businesses can use it to boost their profits. But how about on like a more personal level?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like how can it help us achieve our goals?
Well, think about every goal we set.
Yeah.
Whether it's learning a new language or getting in shape or writing a book, it requires a series of actions.
Yeah.
And so the Pareto Principle can help you prioritize which of those actions will move you most effectively towards that outcome.
So instead of trying to do everything all at once,
yeah,
it's about focusing on the things that'll make the biggest difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like choosing the most direct route to your destination.
Okay.
Instead of taking detours to every scenic overlook along the way.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
But what about if you're feeling stuck? Like you've identified a goal, but you don't know where to start.
Oh, totally. The Pareto Principle can help you get unstuck.
Okay. How?
Well, start by brainstorming all the potential actions you could take to achieve that goal. And then use the Pareto Principle to figure out which 20% of those actions seem most likely to drive 80% of the results.
Okay, so you're saying if my goal was to write a book, instead of feeling overwhelmed by like this huge project, break it down into smaller steps.
Okay.
Like outlining, researching, writing, and then editing.
Yeah, and then which one of those do you think would have the biggest impact first?
So maybe creating a really detailed outline?
Yeah.
Because then I have that structure.
Yeah.
And it'll make the writing process smoother.
Totally. Or maybe you realize that you need to dedicate a set amount of time every day to writing.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for 30 minutes.
But that'll help you make progress.
Yeah, just that consistency.
I'm already seeing how this can change my approach to goal setting.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's about finding those leverage points,
right?
Those key actions.
Yeah.
That'll make the biggest difference.
And it's not just about individual goals.
Okay.
It can be applied to relationships,
Okay.
finances, health and well-being.
Okay, I got to hear about this.
Yeah.
How does it apply to relationships?
Well, let's say you're feeling disconnected from your partner.
Okay.
Instead of trying to change everything about the relationship, use the Pareto Principle to identify the 20% of issues that are causing 80% of the conflict.
Okay.
So maybe it's lack of communication.
Right.
Maybe it's quality time together.
Yeah.
And if you focus on improving those things, you can resolve a lot of the tension.
Okay, so focusing on those root causes, the key issues that are making things bad.
Exactly. And same with finances.
Okay.
Let's say you're trying to reduce your expenses. Instead of cutting back on everything equally, use the Pareto Principle to figure out what's taking up most of your budget.
Okay, so the 20% that's taking up 80%?
Right, like maybe it's dining out too much or subscription services you don't really use.
Yeah.
And by addressing those first, you free up a significant amount of money.
Okay, and you don't have to make huge sacrifices everywhere.
Right.
I love how the Pareto Principle can be used for so many different things.
It is. It's almost like a universal problem-solving tool.
But it's not just about solving problems, right?
Yeah.
What about like seizing opportunities?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay.
Let's say you're at a networking event.
Okay.
Instead of trying to talk to everyone in the room, why not use the Pareto Principle to identify who are the most valuable connections in the room?
Okay.
Maybe it's people in your industry, potential mentors, people with similar interests, and then focus your energy on those people.
Yeah, so it's almost like being strategic with your networking.
Yeah, instead of just collecting business cards.
Right.
You're actually looking for who could I really connect with here?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and same thing applies to other areas of life. Like maybe you're trying to figure out what hobbies to pursue, what skills to develop.
Yeah.
The Pareto Principle can help you figure out what's going to bring you the most joy or fulfillment. Yeah.
So it's like giving us a superpower.
It is, in a way.
To just like cut through all the noise.
Yeah.
And just focus on what really matters.
It's about understanding that not all actions, causes, or opportunities are created equal.
Right.
Some have a far greater impact.
Okay, so it's like finding those hidden gems.
Yeah.
The 20% of efforts that unlock 80% of the results.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so let's recap for our listeners. If they want to start using this in their own lives, what should they do?
Well, first of all, don't overthink it.
Okay.
You don't need a spreadsheet or formulas.
Yeah.
It's really about observation,
okay,
analysis, and willingness to experiment.
So it's more like a mindset shift.
Exactly.
Okay.
So start paying attention.
Yeah.
Where do you see a small number of things driving a majority of the results?
Okay.
Whether they're positive or negative.
Yeah. So like if I notice that I'm spending 80% of my time on tasks that only produce 20% of my results, I need to rethink that.
Exactly. Or maybe you realize 80% of your enjoyment from a hobby comes from 20% of the activities.
Oh, interesting.
That's valuable information about how to spend your time.
It's about becoming aware of those patterns and then using them.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make adjustments.
Okay.
Pareto Principle is a guide, not a rigid rule.
Yeah. So find what works for you.
Exactly. And remember, it works best when it's combined with other strategies.
Okay.
Like time management. Once you've identified those vital few tasks, you can use something like time boxing or the Pomodoro technique.
Yeah, to make sure you're really focusing.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not a magic solution.
Right.
It's part of a bigger holistic approach. And lastly, celebrate your successes.
Oh, that's so important.
Yeah.
You start applying the Pareto Principle, you're going to see results.
Yeah.
Take the time to acknowledge the impact it's having.
It's so easy to just get caught up in the next thing.
It is. We forget to pause and celebrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in always striving for more.
Right.
And we forget to look back and be like, wow, look how far we've come.
Yeah. Celebrate the wins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some final thoughts or advice that you have for our listeners who are like, okay, I'm ready to use this. What are some practical steps I could take?
Yeah. Well, first of all, like I said before, don't overthink it.
Okay.
You don't need a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You don't need any formulas or anything. It's about observation, analysis, and willingness to experiment.
So it's like a mindset shift more than anything.
Totally.
Okay, so just start paying attention.
Yeah, where are you seeing this pattern
That's
playing out? Like
Yeah.
in your work, in your relationships,
Yeah.
your hobbies?
Like if I notice that I'm spending most of my time on tasks that really don't matter that much.
That's a sign I should be focusing somewhere else.
Exactly.
Right.
Or, maybe you realize that 80% of the enjoyment you get from a hobby comes from just 20% of the activities.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, how could you spend more time doing those things?
So it's about recognizing those patterns
Yeah.
and then being like, okay,
Yeah.
let's shift things around.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make adjustments along the way.
Yeah, it's not set in stone.
No.
Okay.
You know what works for one person
Yeah.
might not work for another.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So be willing to experiment.
Okay.
Track your results and adapt.
So find what works best for you.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you know the Pareto Principle.
Yeah.
It works best in combination with other things,
Yeah. Right.
like other strategies, time management.
Yeah.
Once you've identified those vital few tasks, use some time management techniques.
Yeah, like we were talking about before.
Okay, so it's not like a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. It's one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And lastly, don't forget to celebrate your successes.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, as you start applying this and seeing those results,
Yeah.
just take a moment
Yeah.
to appreciate the impact it's having.
It's so important to do that.
It really is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an awesome deep dive.
I agree.
I feel like we've given our listeners so much to think about.
Uh-huh.
And I really hope that they're going to go out there and experiment with this.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a game changer.
So that's it for today's deep dive into the Pareto Principle.
Yes!
We hope you found it informative and empowering.
Uh-huh.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into snackable knowledge.
See you then.